This is lecture preparation for August 14th, the 20th, Sunday, and in ordinary time. Just as I'm doing this, I'm reminded that Monday, August 15th, is the feast of the Assumption of Mary, and as we do in modern times now, is that when it's on a Monday, that the obligatory attendance of Mass for a feast day is withheld. So you will not be obliged to go to Mass on Monday, but it would be a great thing for you to do to celebrate the great love of Jesus' Mother Mary, if you can do that. Okay, so we are in the 20th Sunday in Ordinary Time. A couple of things. There's normally they put good pronunciation lines in here, even sometimes for things that are pretty obvious, but they didn't on this one. There's a in the middle of the first page, on page 231, the first reading, there is a name, the Prince, and I'm going to just tell you how I think it should be pronounced. It would be Malchiah. That makes the most sense to me, and it flows off tongue pretty well. Before that, there's Zedekiah, and then there's another guy whose name is Ebed Melech. Ebed Melech. Yeah, Ebed or Ebed Melech. That's how I would pronounce that. Okay, so let's look at the commentary on this reading from Jeremiah at the bottom of page 231. Following God's plan following God's will often guarantees resistance. Today's gospel reminds us that even neighbors and family members will oppose us when God's searing truth issues from our lips and falls upon ears that don't want to hear it. Such was the fate of Jeremiah. The unpopular message he was given to herald was that deportation and exile were inevitable, and that resistance to the Babylonian invaders would prove futile. The people had turned to false gods, and the coming chastisement was the result of their blatant idolatry. I just want to back up just for a second there. He's talking about neighbors and families opposing us and each other in the midst of this political season, when opinions are really running high. And I would venture to say that many people would say that their political persuasions are based or strongly come out of their religious beliefs on both sides, ironically. And so what happens is we have this opposition in the family. Jesus is going to talk about in the gospel, and it's not comfortable. I don't like it. I wish it was different. I kind of think it's where growth happens. But anyway, when we do have differences of opinion in our family, and that would include our parish family, it's always important that we maintain a respect for the other, because the other is just speaking his or her conscience as they know best how to do. Okay, enough of my preaching. Let's go to the reading back at the bottom of 231, in the middle. God had fortified Jeremiah for his difficult task, assuring him, "They will fight against you, but not prevail over you." When his life was never taken, the prophet endured much suffering. In this reading, King Zedekiah is persuaded to take action against the prophet in order to keep his dire warnings from causing the troops to lose heart. Jeremiah has been calling for surrender to Babylon in order to save the city and the king, but Zedekiah won't trust Jeremiah, fearing for his own fate as if he is taken prisoner. The king's officials would kill Jeremiah in order to silence him, and it takes the intervention of the eunuch Ebed Melech to persuade the king to reverse his earlier order. Because of his faith, Ebed Melech is later told by Jeremiah that he will survive the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. This is a tale of anger and planned retribution, of corrupt motives and criminal injustice suddenly overturned by the efforts of an honest man who risks his own life for the sake of another. Let your delivery match the drama of the story. I'm not going to do it this time, but I would recommend that you would read in this story the before and after of Jeremiah so you can understand a little bit better. A reading from the book of the prophet Jeremiah. In those days, the princes said to the king, Jeremiah ought to be put to death. He is demoralizing the soldiers who are left in this city and all the people by speaking such things to them. He is not interested in the welfare of our people, but in their ruin. King Zedekiah answered, He's in your power, for the king could do nothing with him. And so he took Jeremiah and threw him down into the cistern of Prince Malchiah, which is in the quarters of the guard, letting him down with ropes. There was no water in the cistern, only mud, and Jeremiah sank into the mud. Ebed-Melech, a court official, went there from the palace and said to him, My lord king, these men have been at fault in all they have done to the prophet Jeremiah, casting him into the cistern. He will die of famine on the spot, for there is no more food in the city. Then the king ordered Ebed-Melech, the Cushite, to take 3 men along with him and draw the prophet Jeremiah out of the cistern before he should die. The word of the Lord. Second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews, and I will read the commentary below on that on page 232. In the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels in Los Angeles, they have massive tapestries depicting saints from various eras in all parts of the world. The saints stood side by side, facing forward toward the altar, as if they were part of the liturgical assembly, offering worship at every liturgy. It's a powerful depiction of the cloud of witnesses that the author of Hebrews says surround us at every moment. Because we have so many role models, we are encouraged to do what he did. Persevere in running the race that lies before us. To run swiftly and far, we are told to lay aside the burden of sin that weighs us down and holds us back. The saints took Jesus as their role model because he willingly endured the cross for the sake of the joy that lay beyond the grave, where he now reigns in glory. The author understands that although Christian faith brings eternal reward, it never promises to spare us suffering and trial. But in our suffering, we won't endure anything Jesus hasn't already endured on our behalf. He blazed the trail so that we could take our strength from him. Aware that martyrs had given their all for their faith, the writer of Hebrews reminds his readers that they have not yet reached the point of shedding their blood. At that time, martyrdom was a distinct possibility, and in this century that is witnessing more shedding of Christian blood than any of the previous 20, it remains a sobering reality. A few notes about the reading itself. Let me just go back up to the top where it says to keep in mind, go slowly in the epistles. Paul's style is often a tangle of complex sentences. His mood can change within a single phrase, and that's very important always when you're looking at Paul. In this case, actually what I usually try to do is to locate where the periods are first, just to see where that sentence ends. And then I need to find out what is the main, it's like diagramming sentences when you're in 7th grade. Diagramming and finding the subject and the verb, and if there's a direct object or something like that, but really finding exactly what it is, because then everything else is clauses, and they're subordinate to the main part of the sentence, so you need to keep that in mind. In this case, the first sentence is the longest one, the one that begins with since we are surrounded, and the subject is understood as you, but he's saying let us rid ourselves. So you persevere. That's the main word. Persevere in running the race that lies before us. The phrases that come before and after are in the background of this. Persevere in running the race that lies before us. And then the next part of the phrase is probably second. It says, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. So Jesus is important. Persevere, keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus. It's not a long reading, and it's one that you need to read slowly, but just reading slowly is not good enough. It's not good enough. You've got to be able to emphasize the more important phrases, the more important words, and you have to understand this, otherwise it's just a wash of words. So make sure you look through this as best you can. I'll give you a version of that to begin your own preparation. A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us, and persevere in running the race that lies before us, while keeping our eyes on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. For the sake of the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising its shame, and has taken his seat at the right of the throne of God. Consider how he endured such opposition from sinners, in order that you may not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. The word of the Lord. Kind of a different reading. Make sure you get into that. Okay, gospel reading now. Before we do that, the other to keep in mind on page 233, separating units of thoughts. And this is kind of along what I was saying, but identify the units of thought in your text and use pauses to distinguish one from another. Running words together blurs its meaning and fails to distinguish ideas. Punctuation does not always indicate clearly what words to group together or where to pause. The listener depends on you for this organization of the mass of ideas. Okay, so it's very important that you really diagram the sentence, know what's important to the sentence, but also which ideas are the most important to stand out, and it's your responsibility. Okay, the commentary of the gospel below, starting on 232, going to 233. The cost of discipleship echoes in all three readings today. Jesus is keenly aware of the price that he will pay, and in his anguish, under stress, awaiting the baptism of his death. He came to proclaim the kingdom of his Father, and he knows that some will embrace that message while others will reject it. Jesus' message will set people against one another because it won't be possible to remain neutral in the face of the one who has been set ablaze with the gospel. Others will either stoke the fire or douse the blaze. Jesus makes no apology for the turmoil he brings. In fact, he lays out a challenge saying, "Do you think that I have come to establish peace on the earth?" One could not expect to navigate the length of the Colorado River without experiencing the turbulence of its rapids. They're an inevitable part of the experience. Just so, says Jesus, is the division and controversy that accompany the proclamation of the gospel. They go hand in hand. Jesus understands and alerts his followers that the road on which he will lead them won't be easy. Divisions will come, not because Jesus wants it, but because oil and water don't mix. Because evil won't keep company with good, because dark is dismissed even by the smallest flame. It can't be any other way. That's why those who should be clinging to each other will instead build walls. Wow. Okay. So let's go to this. The Gospel on 233. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "I have come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. There is a baptism with which I must be baptized, and how great is my anguish until it is accomplished. Do you think that I have come to establish peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, a household of 5 will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. A father will be divided against his son, and a son against his father. A mother against his daughter, and a daughter against her mother. A mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. The gospel of the Lord. Kind of a daunting way to end it. A lot of food for thought. Okay, God bless all of you. Thank you. God bless.